We've got a really big show tonight. It's, I feel like I always ask a lot of kind of personal questions of people during this segment, but maybe I can take a moment and give you a little of my personal session. So for those of you who don't know, I actually was supposed to be a lawyer. Very, very much political science, philosophy background. And I feel like that, one of the reasons that it made a lot more sense for me to go into technology, and one of the things I loved about law was that it's everywhere. Law is something that's a part of everything we do. You stop at a stoplight, you don't walk or jaywalk, well, unless you're, in New York. I feel like a lot of kind of everything that we touch and everything that we're a part of is really kind of ubiquitous with this whole law thing. And so it really became, for me personally, a really interesting topic to be involved in technology about 12, 15 years ago. Having grown up in Silicon Valley, having always been a part of technology, it occurred to me that technology was going to be this thing that also is ubiquitous. It's in everyone's pocket. We now have multiple devices, and I think it's going to even get more and more ubiquitous to the point where it drives everything in our life. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and we're also going to talk a little bit about the role of the CIO and how that's changing and where that goes. And so you'll notice it with our panelists. We have a couple of COOs who were previously CIOs, and then we also have a surprise panelist because if I look at traffic, apparently there's another speaking event going on somewhere a little bit from now across town. With somebody who's on loan from DC. And so as a result, one of our panelists is actually stuck in traffic on their way from the airport. So if he makes it, great. And if not, we have a substitute who is no less of a substitute, very good person, tremendous, going to be great. With that in mind, why don't we call up our first interview? I'd like to welcome to the stage, let's see who's actually on there. Joe Simon, please, round of applause. Joe.
Hi.
How are you?
Not bad.
So, Joe.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
Not too bad.
Good.
Didn't get stuck in traffic.
So, I think there's a couple of questions I had to start. I would love to learn more about Joe.
Really? Come on.
Tell us your first job. What was your first job? What got you into technology? Maybe first job out of technology, first job ever, and then first job in technology.
First job was actually with a brewery in India, in tech. Early days of computerization.
All right.
Everything new. We even wrote things like general ledger packages. There were no packages. But that got things interesting because you could see clearly how you could change the way processes can be done.
Sure.
How you could streamline things. And not just take out costs, that was not a big deal in India, but much more increase reliability, accuracy,
sure,
and speed.
Sure.
It's a big thing. I mean, I remember us closing books in 5 days after the month end, which seems strange now, but.
And those are those big kind of accounting books, right?
Yeah.
So what's the last book you read, for pleasure or for work, either one?
Actually, Shantaram.
Okay.
Don't know if you know that, but.
I didn't.
It's actually interesting. Aussie prison escapee who ends up in the slums of Mumbai doing medical work, which he was not trained to, then becomes involved with the gangs of Mumbai, ends up in Afghanistan.
Wow.
And I met him actually at Condé Nast in Mumbai.
Ah.
He's now published author, obviously.
Oh, yeah, of course. Now, so tell us a little bit about your role at Condé Nast when you were there. I kind of want to follow a little bit of the journey of your career, if I could.
Condé Nast was right in the middle of the transition of a lot of media companies, or more likely print companies, moving away from the things that don't break into things that break. Right? I was constantly talked about how you could drop a magazine and nothing happened. And
but you can drop.
You could drop an iPad and things happen.
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
In fact.
But we did make a pretty big move. We were the first guys on something at that time called the digital publishing system from Adobe. We would like to believe we helped them write it, which I think we did. But it was a big evolution for a company that really didn't believe in a digital presence.
Yeah.
into getting into where it not only made a lot of sense, but we were making money not just on advertising, but even content sales.
Now, you were at Viacom and CBS too, right?
Yep.
And with Viacom and CBS, so was that the first CIO role you were in? Or
Yep,
what?
that's right.
So with that role, I mean, obviously kind of getting into that role in the first place, and bear with me a moment, because I think, almost we've talked all day about how CIO is really kind of almost a thankless job in a sense, right? I mean, your entire job is to be invisible as best you can.
Unless you make a mistake, yes.
And then I think, well, so would you do it over? I mean, would you want to
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Why not, right?
Why not, yeah.
Well,
but things have changed, though. Those
true.
were the days when I remember going with my boss then to the CEO and getting the last zero slashed off our budget. Not exactly the easiest thing to do.
No.
But we did manage to get back some of the money, not exactly all the zeros.
Sure.
But the things have evolved from there, where I think even the business guys are beginning to understand how technology is not just desktops and email.
I think at this point, that's for sure.
Yeah, so it's quite a different mindset that CEOs have, and many of them, take the new CEO of Viacom, he certainly knows what this means.
Yeah, and I think, now, especially with your new role, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, what your actual, new...
I just keep cutting technology costs. No, I'm just, no,
it's ubiquitous. I mean, you got to cut costs at some point, right?
Well, yes and no. Now I think understanding what technology can do and using it for the things that we really focus on, really reliability, efficiency, and scalability.
Sure.
I can't do that with manual processes.
Right.
I got to do it with greater automation, definitely a lot of streamlining of process before you automate. But you know that. So it's a lot easier to get the funding for that and getting it done.
So with this, in the new COO role, you know all the tricks that, kind of previously being
There
a
were no
CIO.
tricks. Come on.
From a CIO,
Hard work.
That's right. You know all the hard work and, things that are necessary to get done. So being in this new COO role gives you a lot of flexibility and opportunity to leverage technology.
Yes.
I'm not sure everyone's familiar with Encompass Media, so maybe it makes sense if you want to...
Sure. Basically, we are the guys who help media companies broadcast television. So we're kind of the back office that nobody wants to worry about.
Sure.
So we will take in video, ads, graphics, promos, mix them all up, process them, and amplify them and hit either a satellite or a TV tower.
Sure.
And these days, more and more of streaming the same thing on the internet.
Absolutely.
Either for pay or behind a paywall or for free. Doesn't make a difference.
So I have a handful more questions, but I'd like to bring up our next guest first. And it's John Glowacki.
Do I walk here or?
Make room for everyone.
Thanks for breaking him in.
John, welcome to the show.
Anthony, thank you.
So, John, I'm going to ask you a series of the same questions. What was your first job?
My first job. I thought you were going to ask me when I lost my virginity. More about Johnny.
Was that the first job?
Yeah.
Whoa. This went down.
Is this late night television or? No.
This went downhill very fast.
Yeah. No.
Just wait.
We're going to skip past the first couple jobs, like working on a farm and that kind of thing. No, my first profession was the military.
Okay.
So 21 years, retired Air Force, retired in 2000.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for saying that. Let's see. My daughter is currently serving. She did her time in Afghanistan about a year or so ago, and that was 6 months I didn't sleep, but she came back well. But anyway, I grew up in a household, not particularly well educated, but very technically focused. We actually had an amateur TV station in the house because my father self-taught himself electronics.
Wow.
And got into ham radio, so it was sort of in the blood. When in the military, found my way into a special operations field that's actually highly technical. The Air Force has this peer of SEALs and Special Forces, and that's what I did for most of the career. And when I retired, just before I retired, I spent my last 6 months on the opposite side of the table from companies that were selling to us. And so that was really the beginning of my business education, which was really quite an opportunity in retrospect. Went to work for a small Beltway bandit down in DC after I retired. Great little company. That lasted 2 weeks until a former colleague of mine, I left under my own power, but a former colleague of mine from my military days, I sent my all-call message out, let everybody know where I had landed. And I get this response back, and it, quote, was, "When you're tired of working with those latte-drinking wannabes and want to join a real IT company, give me a call." So the gauntlet was thrown down, but 3 days later, 3 phone calls later, I was giving notice and going to work for Computer Sciences Corporation.
Another small Beltway.
Another small, yeah, just a small one. They've gotten smaller since then, but we grew for a while and then things happened. Yeah, and I went in as a mid-level tech. Felt, look, I'd had a good career, but basically I was an unknown quantity within the industry. So I resigned myself to, I'm starting over. I came in as a mid-level tech guy. 7 years later, I was a corporate VP. I was CTO of the company. And I held that for not quite 5 years until I left, again, under my own power. And I hid for a while. For about 6 months, I didn't tell anybody. And then I finally adjusted the LinkedIn profile, and then I started getting phone calls. And,
Right.
11 to 12, I left in 2012. 11 to 12, we were living in Kuala Lumpur because my other half was also with the company, and she had to be there. And so we had a nice time in Southeast Asia, which, frankly, I almost didn't come back. It's great.
Yeah.
And then
I had the same experience. I went to Thailand and literally, like, you're on the beach the whole time. You're like, it's like cost me $100 a week
Life's
to
good.
live here. I'm not really sure I should go.
People are wonderful. Food's great. Yeah.
I can do my job remotely. This is the on-demand enterprise. I feel like it's totally possible.
But anyway, trying to accelerate this. I spent about 1.5 years. We closed the place in DC. My other half had already built a home on a golf course outside Ottawa. And we said, let's go see what it's like to live on a golf course. So we did that. And about 1.5 years, I became a Canadian resident. And the evening that my immigration attorney calls me and says, okay, the green card's on its way. And I get this lovely note about 10 minutes later from my wife. And it's like, now that you can work here, get a job. And what it was, she had gotten something forwarded to her from LinkedIn working in Ottawa in IT. And I was like, well, that one doesn't really turn me on too much. But there's this other thing next to it called Shared Services Canada. And it's with PwC, and it looks like they want me. And the bio was, take my name out, and it looked like it was me. And they had just won a contract PwC had just won a contract working with Shared Services Canada, and they needed somebody that had a heavy outsourcing background to work on sourcing options. And so I spent a year, what now I call is the longest record of undercover boss, because nobody knew I was going to become the COO later. It turned out I actually knew the recruiter when the time came, had his mobile number, 6 months of vetting to get into that level of position in the government. And 2 years ago, December, I basically started full time. February, the transition was complete, and I was fully in the seat of COO. So that's how I got here.
So did you have the same experience in terms of what Joe did, knowing all of the hard work that the CIO kind of put in place, and
tricks. Let's be honest.
How to slide past all
Don't
of that?
tell him that.
So, are those lessons obviously, helpful given that you're in the shared services role? And Shared Services Canada, maybe if you could tell a little bit.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
We're not Canadians here.
Yeah.
It has to do with maple syrup, I'm sure.
Give it a chance.
Soon we'll all be Canadians? Is that
We're heading there.
There's a counterplot going on. Watch out for the little guy in the room. No, Shared Services Canada, in 2010, the Auditor General wrote this report that, as AGs typically do, hey, you're not doing anything right. In this case, it was focused on IT. And so 2011, the act was passed creating Shared Services Canada, which basically they took a quick scan across all the government entities and they said, okay, what's 80% of it? It's these 42 departments. And they just made a meat cleaver decision. Okay, we're taking all the heavy IT infrastructure out of you, slamming it together, calling it Shared Services Canada, and declaring victory that we're going to solve this IT problem. So if you go through any sort of an outsourcing or business merger, it's typically a one-to-one relationship, and you'll get through that. Imagine doing that with 42 organizations. So you had 42 different ways, if not more, of doing things, different cultures, et cetera, being slammed together. It took 2 years just to figure out what they had acquired in the process. So today, and over time, we're actually given license to support the rest of the government. So we're effectively, you can call us a shared services organization. I prefer to call us a managed services organization because we support 114 different organizations across the G7 government, doing all the data center work, mid-range, mainframe, all the LAN, WAN, telephony, wireless. We were given security after the fact. There was this recognition they hadn't really considered it. And so, to give you an example, so we're approximately 6,000, actually we're closer to 5,500 people now. We started out 64, natural attrition brought us down. We're about 2.4 billion total budget. Part of that is actually a standing budget. The other part's actually a revenue stream. So we do try to operate like a business. When I got there, we really changed the organization, and I created account teams, just adopting business practices. And we have account executives. And I told them, standard measures of an account executive. Keep your customer happy, make your numbers, grow the business. That actually does translate into a government environment because with IT, there's always more demand. We had to get a better handle on it. And so I was actually trying to incentivize people, don't run away from it. Getting more is not a bad thing. So, it's a large in-house IT managed services provider, and we're trying to run it as close to a business as we can. We've actually brought in a few other folks like myself that have come from the managed services industry.
So I've talked to a lot of CIOs who have that desire to be in a COO role or in a CEO role. And I feel like more often than not, it's a very difficult jump, at least to make, or at least it seems like it, because even if you move from company to company, someone kind of calls you and says, well, I've got this CIO role for you, right? So it sounds like both of you have a lesson here, which is, take your time and wait for the right thing. But what other advice would you give to CIOs who are looking to get out of that into a COO role somewhere?
Yeah, good luck.
You heard it here, guys. Just good luck. That's it.
Find the right place that you're comfortable
Yeah.
with. I mean, suddenly I've been in media. The last thing I should do is getting into a retail company.
Sure.
Makes no sense. So as long as you know the domain and you know the customers, you know the technology, no reason why you should not.
Well, retail and media have a lot of similarities in that Amazon wants to put both of them out of business eventually, right? I mean,
Amazon wants to put everybody out.
yeah, that's also true.
I used to debate with HR executives about this point because my view was I never really looked for a specific. Some of them that I know, some of these HR execs will say, find the job you want, so find the environment you like, find the job you want, do everything you have to get that job. And my view was, well, what if I missed the other three? That would have been cool as well.
Right.
So I always looked for conditions, and that's what I would use as my filtering criteria and stick to it, not chase everything, just be very disciplined about what are those conditions I'm looking for, and then filter down. And you do have to be patient. I mean, it's part of this is karma, it seems. You got to wait for it to come around, and eventually I'm a kid from Jersey City, and now I'm in the service of Her Majesty. We all saw this coming, right?
Totally.
So
just like me being a lawyer.
Yeah.
Well, good. So we have one more guest. It's our special guest, who's a mystery guest, mostly because he didn't know he was going to be on the show up until about 10 minutes ago when I told him he should jump on.
Did he know?
That's right. Well, let's go ahead and pull him up. Lou Steinberg. Hi. Lou, thanks for coming.
No worries.
Lou, one of the reasons I feel like you are a good addition to this panel
Because I'm breathing and I'm here.
Because you were willing to be on it. And Jin Ying is still stuck somewhere around Lexington Avenue and like 65th. So, one of the reasons I thought you'd be great is I think you've had a very illustrious career. When I look at kind of the stuff you've done, you've sat on both sides of the table. You've done a variety of different things. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your first job.
Okay.
And then just kind of walk us through the path on how you got here and kind of what's coming next.
So my first job, I was 6. I was in marketing. I kid you not. My older sister started a lemonade stand, and we lived on a dead-end street. We had no traffic, so she had no business. And I went to her and said, if I can get you customers, will you pay me half of the money that you collect?
That is extortion.
She was making
50%?
no money. Yeah. Hey, it turns out marketing makes money.
Location.
Exactly. So I went out. I was 6 years old. I went out to this busy main street. If my mom is watching this, I'm sorry I never told you. I stopped traffic on a busy main street and redirected them into our little development, took half the proceeds. Now, what she didn't do was math, because she had a deal with my mom and dad that she was going to pay for supplies, which turned out to be about half of what she was selling the lemonade for. I took the other half. Good for me.
So there's a difference between net revenue and profit margin. I feel like
Absolutely.
this is a very early lesson that one should learn.
Well, I had zero cost, so, other than maybe
You
needing
took on
some
the
good
risk.
insurance.
You
Yeah,
took on the
exactly.
risk, I'm pretty sure.
So did a bunch of things in college, graduated, went to work for a little computing company called IBM. Maybe you've heard of them. Was actually working as an SE for them in college, and found myself, like all good engineers, in upstate New York, working for IBM, thinking about getting an MBA because that's what you were supposed to do. And while it was interesting, it wasn't interesting enough. And so I announced I was leaving after a couple of years. And they didn't believe me until like a week before like moving trucks are showing up. And my fiance had found a house out in Boston. I was going to take a new gig out there. A week before, they came to me and said, hey, we found this little software team still in IBM. Would you go work for them? Moving trucks, wife, fiance, Boston, no. I would just talk to them. This was 1987. The team I joined, there were 6 of us. We were bidding on a government contract to upgrade something called DARPANet to be something called NSFNet, which in the 80s was going to be the backbone of something called the internet.
It's a fad.
And again, maybe you've heard of it.
Get away from it.
I saw this, fell in love with the project, told my fiance, you know that apartment in Boston you
Pack
just signed
everything
for?
back up.
Yeah, we're not actually moving.
Hopefully her name was on it, right? That's what
So yeah, that's why she doesn't have credit now. But so did that. Had a lot of fun. Ended up running some outsourced networking businesses for IBM. Eventually left. Got to a point where I was young and not particularly interested in some of the politics that were happening in IBM at the time. I was running an outsourced networking business, asked to showcase technology that IBM had built. It was actually my technology from the internet, but also to run a P&L, and my technology was too expensive. And I essentially said, we're in a growth industry, but we're going to fail, right? If we both have to use our kit and have to run a P&L, there's no way for the economics to work out unless I just start cutting. And eventually we won't have enough to sustain. They said, go ahead and do it anyway. I said, no, thank you, left, and started my first startup. IBM was my first client, but built a company in the network analytic fault prediction space. So we would tell you how your network was going to fail a week in the future. And it turns out that was a profitable thing.
Why do I feel like that's a protectionist racket? Like you've just got some kind of like,
Actually, you nailed
this is
it.
going to go down. Just
You
watch.
nailed it. So the Wall Street Journal called us a cross between extortionists and fortune tellers. We've seen your future. It's very bad. If you pay us, you'll be okay. And we built that company, sold it to somebody called Micromuse, which is now part of IBM. IBM Tivoli, so somewhere in the bowels of Tivoli is probably my code. Left that, just picking up the pace. Joined a private equity group, Warburg Pincus, spent a little bit of time with them, so I now moved to the other side of the table. Having gone from raising money, I was now on the funding side. That was fun. Parachuted into a deal we were trying to do with a company called Symbol Technologies. Symbol invented the barcode, made rugged handheld mobile computers, and we had a bit of a turnaround of a $1.3 billion a year company that was losing money and had run out of cash. Oh, by the way, they told the street they were making money when they were losing money. There's a little bit of a problem there because DOJ was threatening to indict the company, and the regulators, the SEC, opened an office next door to my office. That was a problem. But I joined as CTO as part of a turnaround team there. We stabilized it, we grew it, we sold that to Motorola. I then left and joined actually did another startup in the risk management space, in the operational risk management space. That was a lot of fun because I got to tell everybody again how they were going to fail.
I feel like all of this ties back to like 6-year-old Lou standing in traffic.
Absolutely.
It seems like the same exact job, just repeated in different ways.
Absolutely. I did it from the marketing side. I've done it from the tech side. I've been a 3-time CEO of startups, CTO a couple of times.
And so now with your role at TD Ameritrade,
Yep.
I think a lot of what you're doing is kind of steering in that innovation space, right? So,
Right.
you know, I guess maybe in that same context of this evolving role from a technologist perspective, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Wow, where do I see myself in 10 years? Probably sitting on a number of boards, advising startups. I think, you know, technology, everybody talks about the rate of change of technology, and it's a big deal. Very few people talk about how to apply changing technology. So how do you actually make money at this, right? How do you actually make things better for your clients? It's not about just adopting technology. It's about doing something with it, having a purpose. And I see myself advising more. I also have a cyber incubator that I've started on the side of my day job. I got tired of looking for cybersecurity companies that could solve my problems.
Make your own.
I decided to
There you
make
go.
my own. So
Well, good. A ton more questions
Yeah.
coming. However, I have good news. We've brought our helicopter and flown Jun from the other side of the
I'm out.
island. And he's right here, but we'll welcome him up. Come on up.
welcome.
Thank you. You already made it. Thanks. That was a close one. I thought I'd get that chair.
All right. You're here. It's calm. Everything's good.
No
Jun,
rain, no storm, so it's good.
Everything's fine. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Let's go through them just kind of quick. What was your first job?
Oh gosh, my first job, a busboy in a Chinese restaurant. You
I
know?
like it. And oftentimes I feel like that skill set translates well to the CIO role as well.
That's right.
So
Juggling act. Right?
when was the first time you became a CIO? What was kind of that progression and path?
So the first time I became a CIO was with ING. I was in the US at the time, and the role for our Asia Pacific business opened up because at the time it was right after the financial crisis, and the company was getting split into the banking side and the insurance side, and having, I guess, the native language skills, it was very helpful. So I had the opportunity to move to Hong Kong and became the CIO for the Asia Pacific business.
And so now you're in this role at Equifax.
Yep.
Can you tell a little bit about that role, and it's specifically Equifax USIS, or?
Yeah, so I just moved from the Equifax international side to the US, got tired of traveling, all these delays, as you can guess.
Apparently there's issues with delays. And
Yeah, no matter how much I fly, they still can't get me to where I go on time. So anyway, so the role is in the US business, and many of you may know Equifax as a credit bureau. If you want to buy a house, you want to buy a car, anytime you want to take out a loan, we provide the credit reference check, but also we're doing a lot more in the data and analytics space. So besides a credit data set, we also have income data, we have employment data, wealth. TD is actually a customer and a data provider for us as well. So putting all that data together and making use of it, getting into the media space, we are on some of the biggest ad networks to help do segmentation and income modeling, those type of capabilities as well. So my role is as a CIO, I'm responsible for all our technology, both the customer facing, so we actually sell software as well, a lot of decisioning platform, ID and fraud, and also certainly our back office systems.
Good. So now that I've got you all here, I'm going to ask a couple of questions that are kind of on the bookends of what I'll call, role in the CIO world, right? So Joe, how you doing over there? You're all the way so far away.
I'm moving.
I know, it's so close. What are the first three things you do when you walk into a new CIO role or into any new job role? What are the first what's the top three, hit those out? What's your 100-day plan, let's say?
First, you got to listen. Unless you do that, you have no idea where you are or where your team is. Talk to your boss. Make sure you get aligned with him.
So establish what that goal is and get
And sometimes it's not very easy to get that. And then reach out to your peers to make sure you know what their expectations are.
Sure.
Without those three, all the strategy you do, tactical stuff you can do doesn't really get very far.
Agreed. Makes sense. John, I see you nodding. Is that, does that echo?
Basically the same thing. I mean, even, in my situation where I was an advisor to the organization, had a certain amount of insight before I took the role, I wasn't going to be so presumptuous to, well, I've got all the answers and I'm just going to go. It was pretend I didn't have that time and circle back around with all the key stakeholders and get their inputs. And it's not, there's the boss, that's a big deal, colleagues within the organization, talk to my customers, what are they looking for? Sure. In the case of government, you get into all other stakeholders, parliamentarians, et cetera, elected officials.
How has it been different between public and private? I mean, obviously you've spent a lot of time in
for years I've been threatening to write a book and the title is going to be, It's All the Same.
Okay.
Because in the end you can deduce it all down and it really does tend to be the same issues. They color different ways, there are variations on a theme, but the same things tend to happen.
Yeah.
Now you can, I can talk for 4 hours why it's all different, and another 4 hours why it's all the same. So.
People want to get drinks, so not today.
It's a better for a cocktail conversation, anyways.
Even better. Yeah. So, and Lou and Jun, I mean, so are you in agreement? Are is that your 100-day plan? The same three things? I mean,
I think that absolutely those are critical things. I would add really spending time with the customers, right? I think the more and more technology at the forefront, moving from the back office to the front office. So understanding what your customers need and this type of solutions they need from you, right? How do you support that? I think that's a critical aspect as well.
I would just add one thing. The building relationships with your peers, absolutely right. Before you go look for the big things to fix, find 2 or 3 small things that matter to them and build some personal credibility by fixing those first.
Get some wins.
And then once you've got some wins on the board, it's easier to get buy-in for the next thing.
A lot of wisdom in that. So let me flip that question around. Many of you have left your position to go to something else. You knew you were leaving. It wasn't an immediate, ousted or anything like that. So what are the last 3 things you do as in your role before you move on? John?
I think that actually happened to me when I moved back from Hong Kong, and I think one of the key things for me was to make sure there's a good team in place and make some of the moves that you may have hesitated on. When you're there, you're not sure, and if you are moving on to a different role, whether you're in the same company moving to a different role or moving to a different company, I think making sure that team left behind is the right team and getting them to be able to take over, right, and help the next person transition.
I think team's great. Lou?
Yeah, I would say obviously hire the right replacements and get them productive is number one. Number 2 is make sure that your key folks are protected, because in times of change, there's always uncertainty.
And what do you have to do with, I mean, is that like literally, talk to your boss and say, listen, I'm going, but,
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And number 3 is do the thank you tour. Actually go around and travel to the different sites, thank folks on the way out. Life is long, the industry is small, you're probably going to meet these people again, and there's huge value in the thank you tour.
Yeah. John?
Yeah, it's all the same. I mean, you may not think about doing the customer stakeholder tour to go around, and part of it is, the people who you've developed very good relationships with, if you want to get a little bit of critical feedback, that's always good because you're always learning. Don't kid yourself. But I like the idea of working throughout the period, so it's not like at the end all of a sudden I'm trying to do whatever I can to make sure there's a decent legacy. That's the journey you're on throughout the entire time you're in the role. So at this point, it's the cleanup and the thank yous and all of that.
Yeah. Joe?
Yeah, to add to all of that, I think make sure your boss knows when you leave, the guy coming in should have the flexibility to have his own plans, not make him execute what you put in place.
Sure.
Not the easiest thing to do.
No, that's an interesting point. It's almost like, really kind of building, not the succession plan, but also saying, listen, here was my vision, but I'm moving, there's a new vision coming.
Let the whoever coming in
Yeah.
do that. Otherwise,
Yeah. I think that makes sense. So maybe just kind of let's end with what I'll call the quick, give us an oh crap moment during your career.
oh, I can tell you that very easily.
Want a list?
Oh my God.
Right, only one?
Yeah, I mean,
But the easiest one was,
Best one.
you get somebody very senior, the smallest, thinnest, lightest laptop possible, and they complain to you about how old they are, how they can't carry it, the back's breaking, blah, blah, blah. The easiest thing to do is I told them to delete all the big files.
There you go.
And I'm not kidding, it worked.
I love
I
it.
try that.
John?
You got a prime minister.
Only works in media,
Try
though.
that on.
Yeah, no. Well, in media, they're really big files,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, get all those videos out of your pocket,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, no, God, that's a tough list. The one that immediately comes to mind is the most recent. Sometime last year, I got woken up at 3:30 in the morning. The data center's on. We've got over 500 some locations across the country. I'd say a good 30 of those are data centers. We're consolidating, but one of the key ones in the National Capital Region, I got woken up 3:30 in the morning. They said the first words were the data center's on fire, and this is the one that naturally it's the one that everything routes through. The RCMP, aviation. It's all. It turned out it wasn't on fire yet. But we were in a critical shutdown because a particular power device, a PDU, was basically the monitoring on it was dead, and this thing was going into meltdown, literally melting down into the floor. So yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of other ones, but that's probably a good recent one.
That's a good one.
Mine would also be data center. There's a theme here. Hurricane Irene was headed for New York City. Our disaster recovery site was in a building in Jersey City. We had power, but they were predicting that we might lose power, and we knew we needed to, if we were going to lose power, we needed to switch to generators. The generators, turns out, on the roof are right next to the fresh air intake for the building. And so while we had power, they said, you may want to proactively spin up the generators, but if you do, we have to close the fresh air intakes, because otherwise the diesel fumes will kill everybody in the building. Okay, fine, don't want that on my conscience.
I don't know.
They said, well, hang
Seems
on.
like a good trade-off to
Hang
me.
on,
People
hang
or the
on,
data?
It gets
Which
better.
one do you
It's
go
a
for?
cost-cutting measure. It's a way to relieve
We will
costs.
have to evacuate the building if you do that. We can't come back in for a certain period of time, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, it's possible the power won't go out, but because there's a hurricane, debris is going to be flying around. It could take out the generator. So if you switch us to generator, the generator may fail and we may not have needed it and we can't come back in the building for a week. And if you just want to wait and see how it plays out, that's fine. But if we do this on an emergency basis, we may kill about half our staff. What would you like to do? And my first reaction was find a new job.
And what did you do?
We evacuated the building and we turned on the generator.
Wow.
It didn't get taken out and the power dropped and we needed it and it all worked.
Well, see,
Wow.
That's good karma right there. And John, your oh crap moment?
Well, I guess I'll continue the theme of natural disasters. So this was the earthquake and tsunami and the nuclear meltdown literally in Japan. And I remember telling the team, please stop taking videos and posting them on Facebook. Leave the building. They really wanted to share.
That's the age that we live in. I don't think there's any better metaphor, like personal pain and like emergency, rather than get my selfie on Insta. One last question, and I'll ask this, in a kind of just generic, quick answer fashion. If you had to cite one quality that you look for when you hire into your organization, what's the most important quality that you look for? We'll start with you, John.
I think it's being proactive, someone who is willing to just jump in and take action.
A willingness to take risk and fail.
Integrity.
Two more for you. Patience and persistence.
You only get one.
Pick one. They're both P's.
Which one is it? All right.
Patiently persistent.
I want to thank you all very much. Patient persistence, is that what
Patiently
you call it?
Patiently.
Persistently patient. I want to thank you all very much for joining. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the flexibility, Lou, for joining in such last moment. Now we are going to shift to the next portion of our event, which is drinking. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Some quick thank yous just before we do applause. I want to thank the entire Landmark team. To put an event on like this, it actually requires a village. It really does. All the different pieces, Dan Tobin in the back, Nicole Boyer, who's leading our events team, Sarah Clapp, Sam Dominguez. I'm sure I'm missing people who have pinch hit all day and doing a fantastic job with it. So big round of applause for them. A big round of applause for getting very personal and intimate during our late night show with our guests. And also a big round of applause for all of you. Without you guys, this isn't possible. Thank you so much for coming. Let's have a cocktail.